You remember her as the prim proper Miss Jane Hathaway, but the real Nancy Culp, her life behind the camera was wilder, braver, and far more fascinating than anything you saw in the Beverly Hillbillies. Nancy Jane Culp, born in 1921 in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, might look like the quintessential prim, proper Miss Jane Hathaway from the Beverly Hillbillies, but her real life was a whirlwind of courage, ambition, and audacity. From serving in World War II to rubbing shoulders with comedy legends, Nancy's story is full of surprises, some heartwarming, others downright shocking. Want to support our channel? Join the Echo Insider. Just hover over the Echo Insider icon, click and watch new videos before anyone else. Nancy Jane Culp was born in 1921 in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, a quiet town that seemed ordinary but was about to raise a woman who would quietly command attention wherever she went. Being an only child, Nancy's world was small yet intensely focused. Her parents were everything to her. Her mother, Marjorie, wasn't just a teacher. She was a powerhouse of discipline, intellect, and high expectations. Marjorie ran her classroom like a tiny kingdom, and later, as a principal, she shaped minds and inspired ambition. Nancy absorbed it all: the love for learning, the sharpness of thought, and the unspoken lesson that curiosity could be your greatest weapon in life. Her father, Robert, was almost the opposite, a traveling salesman whose life was constantly on the move. Weeks and sometimes months away from home gave Nancy a first-hand lesson in independence. From him, she learned how to adapt, how to handle uncertainty, and how to navigate the world on her own terms. These dual influences, discipline from her mother, adaptability from her father, created a woman who could both think deeply and act boldly. And little did anyone know, these qualities would later help her survive the chaos of Hollywood and the cutthroat world of show business, where charm alone wasn't enough. Even as a child, Nancy had this spark of curiosity. She noticed everything: how people moved, how they spoke, the little cracks in their polite facades. It was almost as if she were quietly cataloging the world, preparing for a life where observation would become one of her most powerful tools. And in a world that often underestimated women, this quiet intensity would make her impossible to ignore. Nancy's path wasn't just about acting, it began with words. She followed her mother's intellectual footsteps and enrolled at Florida State University, which back then was known as the Florida State College for Women. There, she dove headfirst into journalism, a field dominated by men at the time. She wasn't just writing papers, she was training herself to see the world, to uncover stories others overlooked, to find the extraordinary hidden in the ordinary. While most students worried about exams and social life, Nancy was already exploring the edges of society, working for the Miami Beach Tropics, a local newspaper covering cultural events, theater, and social happenings. She rubbed elbows with local celebrities, politicians, and artists, quietly learning the language of influence and performance. Every interview she wrote, every story she uncovered, was another layer of preparation for a Hollywood career that would later rely as much on perception as on talent. And then came the bigger backdrop, World War II. She graduated in 1943, right in the middle of global chaos. The world was changing overnight, and Nancy, like so many of her generation, felt the pull to do something bigger. But for now, she honed her skills, her precision with words, her ability to read people, and her fearless curiosity. These weren't just academic exercises. They were the foundation of a woman who would navigate fame, fortune, and Hollywood's hidden dramas with the same quiet, relentless intelligence that had defined her childhood. By the time she would step onto a movie set, Nancy already had a superpower most actors never acquire. She knew how to observe, analyze, and understand people, and in a town where everyone is pretending, knowing how to truly see someone is the ultimate advantage. As the world was engulfed in the chaos of World War II, Nancy Culp wasn't content to sit back and watch history unfold from the sidelines. While most young women of her generation were focused on college life or social events, Nancy felt a pull, a call to serve her country. She joined the Waves, the women accepted for volunteer emergency service, a branch of the U.S. Naval Reserve that was still relatively new and groundbreaking for women. This wasn't just a simple decision. It was a daring leap into a world dominated by men, where women were still fighting to prove they belonged. Imagine the courage it took, leaving the familiar safety of home, stepping into strict military discipline, and learning to navigate both physical and social challenges in an environment that could be as intimidating as it was transformative. Nancy didn't just survive, she thrived. She earned the respect of her peers and superiors, receiving multiple commendations for her dedication and skill. Every task she undertook, from paperwork to operations, was executed with precision and intelligence. But beyond the medals and recognition, what shaped Nancy most was the resilience she built. The ability to stay calm under pressure, to think on her feet, and to understand people quickly. These skills, forged in a time of global uncertainty, would later become her secret weapons in Hollywood, where survival depended as much on wit and observation as on talent. Even amidst uniform discipline and rigid schedules, Nancy never lost her spark. She was curious, observant, and quietly confident, qualities that allowed her to see the nuances of human behavior that others missed. It was in the Waves, in the heart of a world at war, that Nancy began shaping the woman who would later captivate millions on screen, not just with her performances, but with her presence. After the war, most veterans were seeking normalcy, but Nancy's ambitions were anything but ordinary. She transitioned from military life to Hollywood, a world as chaotic and unpredictable as the battlefield she had just left. Her first steps onto the silver screen came with small, unassuming roles in films like The Model and The Marriage Broker. They were tiny parts, almost invisible to the casual viewer, but for Nancy, each role was a foothold into an industry that could be as unforgiving as it was glamorous. Hollywood is full of stories of overnight fame, but Nancy's journey was different. It wasn't about luck, it was about preparation, meeting opportunity. Every scene she observed, every line she delivered honed her instincts. Her timing, her attention to detail, and her ability to read the energy in a room set her apart from countless others trying to make it in the business. And then came the first taste of real recognition. Small roles turned into slightly larger ones. She played Emma in The Caddy, a comedy that allowed her to reveal a natural sense of humor and the kind of effortless charm that would become her signature. She was building a reputation quietly, but unmistakably. Nancy Culp could be relied upon to bring intelligence, nuance, and subtle humor to any part she played. Hollywood could be ruthless, but Nancy navigated it with the same precision she had learned from observing people at home and in the military. She wasn't flashy or demanding, but there was a magnetism in how she carried herself, a combination of wit, poise, and quiet confidence that made directors, co-stars, and audiences take notice. And little did they know, the prim, proper persona that would later define her most famous role was just one layer of a woman whose life story was about to become as fascinating as any character she played on screen. By the mid-1950s, Nancy Culp had moved beyond small supporting parts and was stepping into a world that would define her career and her legacy. Television was exploding, and Nancy had the perfect combination of intelligence, timing, and charm to thrive. She landed a recurring role on The Bob Cummings Show as Pamela Livingstone, a quirky and intelligent character who was instantly relatable, funny, and full of warmth. Audiences loved her, and in a medium still finding its footing, Nancy's presence became a touchstone of consistency and skill. But it wasn't just about playing the role. Nancy brought something deeper, a sense of authenticity. She could read the energy on set, improvise with co-stars, and deliver lines in a way that felt effortless yet precise. Guest appearances on shows like Topper and December Bride demonstrated her versatility, and directors quickly realized that Nancy could elevate even minor scenes into memorable moments. Hollywood can often typecast talented actors into single molds, but Nancy managed to balance both comedy and drama with subtle skill. In films like Sabrina, she worked alongside legends like Audrey Hepburn and Humphrey Bogart, proving she could hold her own even among giants. She didn't just act, she observed, absorbed, and subtly influenced the tone of the scenes she was in, making her performances linger long after the credits rolled. Her rise wasn't overnight, and it wasn't flashy, but that steady accumulation of roles, credibility, and subtle brilliance positioned Nancy as one of Hollywood's most reliable supporting actresses, a woman whose talent demanded attention without ever screaming for it. And this foundation would later make her prim, proper image in the Beverly Hillbillies not just believable, but iconic. From the late 1950s through the 1970s, Nancy Culp's career hit a rhythm that few actors achieve. A steady blend of television stardom and film appearances that showcased her comedic genius. She secured recurring roles on beloved shows like Our Miss Brooks and Date with the Angels, where her characters were eccentric yet endearing, always intelligent, always memorable. Nancy had the rare ability to turn subtle gestures, a glance, or a pause, into comedic gold, creating characters that audiences couldn't forget. Her film work during this era was equally impressive. She appeared in musicals, comedies, and even westerns, proving her range extended far beyond the quirky side character label. Movies like Anything Goes, Kiss Them For Me, and The Three Faces of Eve allowed her to experiment with different genres, and she did so with a confidence that came from years of meticulous observation, timing, and sheer dedication. But what truly set Nancy apart was her ability to adapt to a rapidly evolving entertainment landscape. Television was becoming the dominant medium, and she transitioned seamlessly, moving from guest roles to recurring parts while keeping her performances fresh and compelling. She could make a living room full of viewers laugh, yet in the next scene, make them pause with a quiet, subtle expression. And all the while, Nancy remained humble and grounded, a woman who observed, learned, and absorbed the pulse of the industry. In a world full of stars, desperate for attention, she commanded it effortlessly, not by shouting, but by letting her intelligence, charm, and comedic instincts speak for themselves. By the end of this period, Nancy Culp wasn't just a familiar face on screens across America. She was a master of her craft, quietly shaping the comedic tone of an entire generation of television. Nancy Culp might have been Miss Jane Hathaway to millions, but behind the prim facade was a life filled with courage, ambition, and unforgettable stories. She proved that even in Hollywood you can be yourself, leave a mark, and still command the kind of attention that lasts long after the credits roll. So next time you watch her on screen, remember there's always more than meets the eye. If you enjoyed this story, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. It really makes us smile. And if you're hungry for more fascinating tales, check out the 2 videos right below. You might just discover your next favorite story.